Tonight is June the 6th, 2022, and it is approximately 6:02 p.m. I'm going to call the Building Codes Committee to order. All council members are in attendance, or committee members, I should say. Tab Matney, Frank Allgood, and myself. We also have City Administrator Brandon Madden, and we have our City Attorney Daniel Hughes in attendance. First, we have public comment. Hearing none, we'll move on to reading and approval of the minutes from May the 2nd. Do I hear a motion?
Move for approval as presented.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, it is unanimous. Then we have reports or communications from city officers. Mr. Deerhog's on vacation. Do you have a report?
No, Ms. Kuzner, there's no report other than the budget is winding down for BDS. We're right at the end of the fiscal year, and everything looks good.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to unfinished business, which is an amendment to Chapter 18, Article 2, which is nuisances of the Mauldin Code of Ordinances to authorize the code enforcement official rather than the building and zoning director to enforce certain provisions contained herein and to provide for and establish certain standards to protect against nuisances caused by light glare and light trespass and for other matters related thereto. So we had this discussion last month, I think, and I think there were going to be some changes made to the proposed ordinance, or we had discussed maybe making some changes to the light nuisance standards.
And I believe that that ordinance was the same ordinance that you're looking at this evening was the one that was before you last month. And David had asked me to, the committee had questions and asked me to come tonight to answer those questions. So I don't believe it's gone on under any changes since the last time the committee reviewed it.
Okay, thank you. I believe that Mr. Allgood had a question about distance.
Correct. That was reflected in the minutes from last time, where one of my big hangups on this was a distance or radius around where the light is in terms of who would be able to file the complaint. It's my thought, if I am passing the light, I shouldn't be the one who can issue the complaint. But if I am a neighbor of where the light is, then I would have the right to complain or file a grievance or whatever the proper procedure would be. But that was my point from last time.
Right, so your point is, Mr. Allgood, that if you were driving by someone's house and you saw a very bright light that you didn't like, that would not necessarily entitle you to call in and complain about that being a light nuisance. It would have to be an adjacent property.
Correct.
Well, that certainly is not the intent of this ordinance. And the way I see this ordinance as being, well, really with any nuisance violation, is complaint driven. And if the city is not out looking for the light violators, but if they do receive a call, they have to have some measure in which to determine if a violation has occurred. And some of these lighting ordinances that other cities have adopted are very draconian. I mean, they go on, and there's a litany of different standards they have to meet. And I think this does not take that approach. It's got more of a 30,000-foot view to it, and it allows the city to force compliance. And whether or not the person is prosecuted for it is a different story. All that's allowed to be prosecuted for a light, they violate the ordinance from a nuisance standpoint. But what we're trying to do is allow people to be able to, if they have if they're bothered by a light that's adjacent to them, there's a standard by which the codes enforcement officer can go out there, determine if in fact it does constitute a nuisance. And if the person fails to comply with the code enforcement's directives, they could be cited. So that's kind of the way that I've approached it in drafting the ordinance.
So it does say the word adjacent?
It says nearby.
Controlling nearby properties. Yeah. So the idea being, it could be 2 or 3 houses down. If that person's bothered by the same glare, it wouldn't have to be necessarily adjacent. I'm not sure if we changed it just to adjacent, if we'd accomplish what we want to accomplish, but of course that's up to council to determine.
I believe that sometimes one light can affect neighbors 2 and 3 doors down. So if they are so bothered by it that, they are nearby, but, that they should be allowed to file a complaint. However, I think just driving down the street, unless it's something that blinds you to where you cannot see the road, I think that would be an issue, but I think Duke Power would probably have to maybe take care of the light intensity on that.
Has this ever come up before in previous councils, a light ordinance?
Not to my knowledge, but maybe others here, you could speak to that.
I'm not aware. I think this is the first time I've been involved in.
Mr. Matney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Who would be responsible for any fines levied under this ordinance?
The codes enforcement issue,
But who would have to pay the fine?
the property owner.
Even if the light on the property is not the property owner's light, but is owned by an electric utility that is paid for by the property owner?
Okay. Well, if the light is not controlled by the property owner, then it would not be the property owner's responsibility to correct the non-conforming or the violation.
And going to the non-conforming light, I noticed that there is an exception for non-conforming lights within this proposed ordinance. So if a light that this proposed ordinance is directed to in the first place is already in existence, then this ordinance's adoption really wouldn't have any effect on the non-conforming light, correct?
Well, what I didn't want to happen is if we said that no one's grandfathered in, the city to be in the position to having to go make people change their lighting. But I carved out an exception within that section B that you're referring to that says, provided however, that if it does provide direct light or glare onto right of way or to residential properties and determined to be a public nuisance, then that could be enforced. So that would be a method in which we could cure lights that are causing light glare, light pollution that the ordinance is trying to prevent.
Would something like this be better served in having individual conversations with the electric utility that owns the light, or do we really need to go down the road of having an ordinance?
That is,
And that can be a rhetorical question if you
Yeah,
don't want to get
well-
involved in policy, and I understand
well,
that, because I get that.
my response was I don't know the answer to that question. I mean,
That's a good answer.
But I think that I do, only because I have had said conversation with the electric company. And they said it's up to the homeowner. It's not up to me. So, I mean, what do you do? What do you do?
So the utility is saying the homeowner has to change the light?
No, what they're saying is like if I said something to like the poll worker about the light, he'd say I would have to take it up with the homeowner because they have a work order. And even though I had already taken it up with the homeowner, I mean, personally, I've done everything on my end to be able to remedy this. So I will continue working on my neighbor, but as far as other people in the city who come across this problem, we don't live in Mayberry, and this is not the 1950s. And people nowadays, some of them are just angry. And I think that if we don't have policies in place for things in the future, we can't just wait for something to happen and go, oh, well, now we need to make a policy for that. Because somebody got injured because somebody was angry at their light or whatever nuisance. Not everybody's going to play nice.
Well, I know that other municipalities have adopted lighting ordinances, so this is not unique. What I don't know is I have not spoken, and I'm not sure if Mr. Deerhog has, spoken to other jurisdictions to see how effective their lighting ordinances have been, which would be a worthwhile question. But again, I will just reiterate, this is tended to be like complaint driven. If the city were to adopt it, we would have a basis on which to enforce it. Not that the city's out looking for violators.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
would you like for all of council to be able to have input on this item?
I would. I would like for everyone to have a say.
If you would like that, then I will vote to forward it to council for council's input with the understanding that I would not be able to vote for it in full council.
Okay. One thing that I would like to ask you though is, if there was a nuisance that was affecting you and your neighbor was not willing to work with you to fix it, what would your recourse be?
My recourse would be the same as anyone else's recourse. If I have a neighbor that is infringing upon my personal rights and that neighbor did not cease infringing upon those personal rights, then we would take legal action. I believe that government is designed to do the things that people can't do for themselves, and I get very concerned when we start putting in policies and laws like this. You know, just because, and I understand what you're going through, and I think that it stinks, and I wish that they would be more willing to work with you, and I think that ultimately they could be if you continue, especially if they understand what's going through the process right now. But I have a very difficult time justifying changing the law for something that could otherwise be settled.
I understand what you're saying. I think that we have a lot of things in our ordinances that possibly residents don't even know that it's in there. So, uh, but I appreciate your willingness to make a motion.
But at the appropriate time, I would move that we forward this to full council.
Okay. Any other questions?
I still struggle with the nearby. To understand what classifies as nearby. I know that sounds like I'm getting in the weeds, and I am getting in the weeds. I realize that.
Well, there is no, with any nuisance case, council has dealt with noise ordinance a number of occasions. And it's, any nuisance ordinance has difficulties in enforcement because something that bothers someone may not bother another person. And so from someone who's prosecuted cases, spent the first part of their career doing that, you know, it's difficult, prosecutorial point, to meet a certain burden of proof. And that is kind of getting back to, well, how, if light nuisance is a problem, what's the best way to go about it? And declaring it a nuisance and giving the city the mechanism to hopefully get people to comply is the approach that I think is best. And nearby, if you just said adjacent, I just don't know if that's big, especially with how close houses are built these days. I mean, if you've got a bright enough light, it's going to affect 5 or 6 houses. And so the house, you know, and I realize that it's at the whim of someone who's very sensitive to any type of light. It could be calling and complain, and I get that. I think the language is, to me, and you know, we can modify it if it suits council better to be adjacent, but I don't know if that would accomplish what we're seeking to accomplish if the council were willing to adopt this.
Right. Again, my take on it wasn't really necessarily actually a term adjacent versus nearby, but to actually define a radius around the said light.
Well, it when I was looking at some of these other ordinances that are out there, I mean, they were about 5 times as long as what we've got here because of all of these various standards and definitions. And what I didn't want to see is us, you know, trying to figure out exactly what constitutes a violation. And if you get into a radius, do we want to have our codes enforcement officer out there measuring from light to house, determine if it meets a standard, and okay, what type of bulb is it? Is it 150 watts or is it 400 watts? I mean, what is it?
They're going to have to do that if they go out.
And then, but if it's a 400-watt bulb, does that mean it's a radius of 200 feet and it's 175 is 50 feet? I mean,
When
you
the
can
code
see kind of the
enforcement, when
struggle.
the code enforcement officer goes out, isn't he or she going to have to make that call anyways?
Well, it's going to be based on pictures and the testimony of the person who's complaining that this is causing a light glare. And of course, there are some standards in here that I put regarding, certain wattage. So if it's 400 watts, it's got to do this,
Mhm.
175. But if you start getting into radiuses, I'm just, and you could, but you'd have to figure out, okay, what's the proper radius for a certain wattage bulb versus a lesser wattage bulb. You could do that. It's just the direction I was receiving from Mr. Deerhog was that we did not want to be that technical, that complicated in our approach.
I'm in the same boat, I think, as Mr. Matney. I'm fine with bringing this to full council. I'm not sure if I'll support it in the end. My take on it is if I pass the light because I'm not within a radius, I don't think I have the right to issue the complaint. And I actually passed the light.
Okay, so let me read this to you because this is the Division 4, which I believe is new. Is this the one that you drafted?
And Madam Chair, if you want me to rescind my motion, I can, but the motion was made, so we needed a second for discussion. But if you want to,
Okay,
I'm happy to rescind it if you'd like.
no, that's fine. So we can discuss this further.
Second.
Okay, now discussion. So Division 4, light glare and light trespass on A. Any light glare or light trespass of such character, intensity, or duration which substantially interferes with the public rights of way or with the comfortable enjoyment of persons with ordinary sensibilities occupying, owning, or controlling nearby properties within the jurisdictional limits of the city is hereby declared to be unlawful, constitutes a nuisance, and is prohibited. So I don't know if that helps at all. I mean, so let's just take said light. When you pass it and you turn on said street, does that light bother you enough that you would file a complaint?
If I lived next to it, I would file it.
No, I'm talking about when you are driving down the road.
I don't think it's my right to complain about that.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is that I believe that at night, if it bothers your enjoyment of your own property in any manner, and the properties of two other neighbors, which they would have to bring their own complaint. That's pretty much, I mean, it is, if it encroaches on your property, then I think that you have a right. If you're driving down the street and it blinds you, then I get it. I would say you would have a right as well, but.
One other quick question for you. Regardless of what happens, we probably need to change it from building and zoning director to code enforcement official. I assume there was a reason for that change.
You talk about in the first part of the,
Yeah.
yeah, so the first part of the ordinance amendment, I was not involved in, but yes, the language was being changed from building and officer to codes enforcement official. So that is separate from the Division 4 that I added. But yes, I believe the first part of that amendment, which makes those text amendment changes to from building and zoning director to code enforcement official, needs, I think, from building and codes office, that amendment is not subject to the debate we've had thus far.
Other discussion? Okay. All in favor of sending this to full council for review? Say aye.
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 Aye. All right, so it carries unanimous. All right, there is no new business. Any public comment?
There's what Mr. Curlin like speak.
Yes, Mr. Curlin.
He's on mute.
Is he on mute?
Mr. Curlin, if you could unmute your,
Can you hear me now?
yep, can hear you now.
Thank you. This is my first time sitting in on a city council meeting virtually. I just wanted to say that I agree with one of the council members. I'm sorry, I can't tell who is who. I'm just listening in, who was saying that it needs to be an adjacent property. Surely if it's bothering 5 or 6 homes, an adjacent property would reasonably agree that it's an issue. And that's it. This might get out of hand at Christmas time if everybody puts up Christmas lights. Something to consider. That's all I had. That's the only comment. Thank you guys.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with having it read adjacent, because if you have an adjacent homeowner that complains and something's done about it, that would certainly take care of the surrounding properties. Any other public comment?
Ms. Kuzner, I would just, the holiday lights are exempted. That's not subject to the lighting ordinance.
Right. Thank you. All right, committee concerns. Hearing none, what do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned at 6:30 PM.
All right, calling EPD committee to order June 6th. It is currently 6:30 PM. Everybody's present. First opportunity for public comment. Anybody in chambers want to comment? Mr. Madden, do we have anybody online that wants to comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. You'll have an opportunity again shortly. So what do we hear on reading and approval of minutes?
I will approve the minutes from May the 2nd as submitted.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. That brings us to reports and communications from city officers. How are we doing on budget, Mr. Madden?
Budget is on par. Actually, I would consider it somewhat under budget at this time, as they go through the end of the fiscal year, end of this month.
Any questions for Mr. Madden? All right, then that is going to take us to City Center Village update. Mr. Parker could not be with us tonight, but provided Mr. Madden with an email update. First, as far as Maverick Station is concerned, tenants, as we know, Sully Steamers and Bohemian Bull. They're also announcing another tenant, iCryo, which is cryotherapy and IV infusion and light therapy. and they will soon announce the final tenant, which is a national credit tenant. Wrapping up construction on the building and tenant upfits are beginning. Sully's is underway with Bohemian Bull, iCryo following soon. Landscaping, as you probably noticed tonight, is going in, should wrap up this week. Parking lot paving will begin once the landscaping is complete. Mr. Parker says overall, the project is looking great, and he is excited to be moving into the final phase. If all goes as planned, we should be eating Sully's from Maverick Station by late August. So that's good news for those of you who are Sully's fans, and I'm one of them. City Center Village, still in a holding pattern while Co-Transco finalizes the road plan. He says that they've had some great meetings with them over the last couple of months, and they seem to be making progress. One big concern has been the road rights of ways and the effect that it would have on the townhome unit count, and that it is imperative that they don't lose any of those units. At this point, it looks like a little shifting of any building pads may need to occur, but we're optimistic it won't necessitate the loss of any units, he says. Should have an updated plan from Co-Transco this week that will show the final right-of-way lines. Additionally, Co-Transco should be able to update the Parker Group on their timeline to complete engineered construction drawings for the road. He says, overall, we remain very excited to move forward with city center portion of our project. Drew. So that is an update from Mr. Parker on that. Thank you, Mr. Madden, for passing that along. We don't have any unfinished business. We don't have any new business. Do we have any public that wants to comment? Hearing none, do I have committee concerns? Hearing none, what do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned at 6:33.
You ready? All right. Call to order the Public Works Committee meeting on June the 6th. It is 6:37 PM. I have myself and Mr. Reynolds here, as well as Mr. Matt Fleeman and Mr. Matt. Let's see, first start with public oh, I'm making a note, Ms. Carol King is unavailable today for today's meeting, so she's not here. Any public comments? One? No? Okay, reading and approval of minutes from April 4th.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Public Works Committee meeting minutes from April 4th, 2022.
I second that motion. Any discussion?
No discussion.
Discussion, those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Ayes have it. Move on. Okay. Report of communications from city officers. Mr. Fleeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bear with me, there's a lot going on at Public Works, and I just want to summarize everything. Typically, I just come up here and shoot the budget, but we've got a lot of capital projects going on, so I'll bring you up to speed.
All 14 departments you're going to summarize?
All right, I'm gonna try. So, the HVAC capital investment improvement program, we so far have done unit replacements at Springfield, Sunset, and City Park. Other units are ongoing. We still have all the buildings to go. Trash trucks, we should have the 2 new sidearm trash trucks at the end of the month. The other 2 smaller trucks, we're thinking late August, beginning of September. The VACCON and dually delivery dates are still unknown. If you were out at the park this past weekend for the baseball tournament, you may have noticed the new trash cans that were part of the capital improvement. We've gone ahead and poured concrete pads, and we've installed them at Sunset. We're starting at Springfield. They actually made a mistake in our order, so right now the lids are blue, but the black lids are being sent to us, and we get to keep the blue lids free of charge. The cultural center is making progress. We're still waiting on some electrical for Duke to set a transformer. We've done the ceiling on the inside of the cultural center. They've got the metal studs up. Conduits have been pulled. I'd say 50, 55% complete. Let's put a number on it. For the fire station, we were all there for the groundbreaking ceremony. We've got the sewer plans submitted and permitted. Public Works will be out there installing the sewer line for the fire station tomorrow. We've got all the locates, got all the encroachment permits, and so we'll get that installed. We're still waiting on some contractual agreements between us and Greenville Water before we can get the water connects. For our enterprise asset management system, we've gone ahead and had the kickoff. We've turned over our databases, spreadsheets. I've gone ahead and taken all the GIS files. I migrated them to the GIS online, so we actually have a city GIS now. Greenville County was so nice as to provide me their whole basically base map system, and we're built on top of it. So we have all the county information. Ridgeway Station, we have gone ahead and ordered the materials to reline the sewer pipe right there for the pedestrian bridge. Right now, we are planning to do the work the week of the 14th. So we've been working with the contractors out there and with our pipeline subcontractor, and with the holiday and everything else, this is the week of the 14th is the week that we plan to be out there. Work itself will take about a day, but just we have to do bypass pumping and everything else.
You've ordered the materials. Are they on site or is there lead time for materials?
Oh, we've ordered the materials. We ordered them several weeks ago. They have to manufacture because for the pipeline CIPP pipeliner,
Yep.
The exact dimensions. We have to camera it first. Then they have to manufacture it. And then it's basically put in cold storage until it arrives on site, and they call it a reefer truck, and it's just a chilled vehicle, and then it's pulled out, and we invert it and steam it and cure it in place. If you've been down Forester, the Pine Forest Pump Station tie-in has begun. You have big holes open on either side. They've doghoused the existing sewer line and stubbed out some pipe. They're looking to either tomorrow or the next day actually do the bore underneath Forester. It'll be tied in, but flows won't come to our pump station until we've actually done all the appropriate sewer testing. As far as our paving program, they're still not in our area yet. So I know the year's getting on, but they haven't got to us yet. They let us be first last time, so I think we're going to be last this time. And then the Basin 5 rehab, which is the grant project that we have, they have finished all the cammering and cleaning activities. They've ordered their materials. There's a few point repairs they want to make prior to the relining. So we've done encroachment permits. That work should happen in the next week or two, and then probably July I'm gonna start reporting on the number of lines that have been relined. So, and then as far as budget, we're wrapping down the year. For the most part, everyone's right in line. Fleet, parks, street and sewer, sanitation, we have more in our budget than what we should at this point. So that concludes the Public Works summary. If you have any questions, please let me know. Yes.
You want to go first? Go ahead. Any update? I know we looked at getting the truck for the leaves, and I know we postponed it because the price shot up. We keeping an eye on that.
It's actually gotten tremendously worse.
Understood. Couple Clydesdales and
we actually, I don't know if you're aware or not, but Greater Greenville currently hauls its waste to Republic as its transfer station. Greater Greenville has, it was about a year ago, they decided that they didn't want to continue with that because they had issues with the Republic. I'm privy to what all those issues were, but ultimately it facilitated them getting the funding, buying property, and moving forward and building their own transfer station. They're currently in the process of doing it. It's over there off of like Pendleton Road by 25 by, like the recycling places, Freetown.
figured out.
It's West End. So they have property and they're going to be constructing a transfer station. They're looking to get it probably early next year to be fully up and running. I've spoken with their sanitation manager. They've told us that if we wanted to bring it to them, they would haul it. We certainly could pursue that option. The better solution, however, would be, since Greater Greenville's pulling out of Republic, Republic now has pad space that the city of Mauldin can take over. And ultimately, I think that that would be financially in the best interest of the city.
Where's that located?
It's on Mauldin Road or Butler Road. You just head out.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
west.
Far from the sewage plant.
Yeah, before you get to the sewage
Before you
plant,
get Sewage plant,
Gotcha.
or the old Southeast Trucking used to be,
right beside it, yep.
right beside it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Off the wall question. Seeing as how you have 14 budgets, you're a manpower. Where are you at staffing right now, percentage wise?
Percentage wise, our vacancy rate is about 6% right now.
Okay.
We have 40 staff positions, including myself. We do have a number of openings.
That's better than I anticipated. Okay.
Because of, a couple of employees have made it to our roster from the temporary service.
Great.
So they've worked diligently, they've shown up, they've proven themselves, and so we brought them out.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. That's it. And unfinished business, there is none. New business, stormwater task order.
All right, so what you have before you is an authorization to approve task order number 1 for KCI to provide stormwater project design services. If you remember, we sent out an RFQ looking for stormwater engineering design, construction management services, using some of the ARPA money that we have Council Memorandum 9-1 set aside. We met, Mr. Mann and myself sat down with KCI, identified some of the lingering stormwater concerns throughout the city. We provided ample documentation, maps, stories, complaints, and they came up with task order number 1, which includes, among other things, stormwater, citywide stormwater assessment, which we'll probably employ into a master plan. But then they went ahead and earmarked all of the problematic places that we brought to their attention and proposed what part of what their study would entail for that area and what design services they are going to include. If you've had the chance to read through this, it's behind Harrison's, it's Bishop Heights, it's the ones that we all know. So the authorization, the financial impact of it comes to 226, which is far less than what we have budgeted. The remaining money will obviously include implementation construction costs. And you guys did approve the contract with KCI. Typically, we would move forward. I just wanted to take this opportunity to bring this to you guys. You did authorize us to spend the money to do it with KCI. I just felt that I want you guys to know what we're doing and what the plan is. So I am requesting authorization, even though you technically already gave it.
That was my question. And we already approved them. There's this difference. You just want double secret probation. No. You want to double down on your authorization. Understood.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, sometimes there may be a disconnect between all that we do. You guys have a lot going on. You may not know everything that we do in Public Works, and it's just, this is my podium. This is my opportunity. This is what we're doing. If you want to make any modifications, any changes, this is the plan.
Your motion.
I make a motion that we forward to full council with a recommendation of approval, the authorization of the task order 1 with KCI for engineering services associated with stormwater project design services. that cover everything?
Second.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Not to exceed $227,000. Perfect.
I second. Discussion.
I have none.
Went through this, looked very detailed. I can see what they're doing. Did seem to hit all the problem areas. I couldn't think of one they didn't discuss on here. This will give us then the roadmap going forward for years to come, realistically, what we need to go after, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Those in favor, or any further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other quick item, just because Mr. Fleeman mentioned it, we allocated 1.2 million dollars of ARPA funding. This would come from that funding.
Correct.
That is correct. Yep.
All right. With
That's all I
that,
have.
no others? Okay, with that, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Moves to full council. All right, acceptance of Loblolly Circle.
So what you have in front of you is a request to accept Loblolly Circle Extension into the city's roadway inventory. Loblolly transects the Parkland. There it is. Yeah, Parkland development. Currently, on the left-hand side of your figure there, Loblolly with all the townhomes is in the city inventory. But as they expand in the future phases towards the pond on the east side of your drawing and up to the north side, Loblolly extension there is a county road. We went back and forth with the county because it doesn't connect to any other county road, and it's going to serve a neighborhood. They asked that we just accept it into our roadway inventory. We're going to make we already accepted the first section of Loblolly into our roadway inventory. We required the developer to widen and to meet our roadway standards, which they did. The Loblolly extension will be the same. We'll ask for them to widen to the standards, and all the construction road testing will I'll be present for the proof rolls and all the inspections, and it'll meet our city standards. So there's some further information in there about the phases of Parkland. There is no financial or fiscal impact. My recommendation is that we accept it. However, if you wish to provide a different direction, please let me know.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept Loblolly Circle Extension, road number F-PD-72 in the city roads inventory.
Second. Discussion. Those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those against, like sign. Ayes have it. Moves to full council. All right. Mosquito spraying program.
All right. So what you have before you is an authorization to eliminate the citywide mosquito fogging program. Public Works, has a program. We work after hours on the weekends. We break the city into quadrants, and we fog using a product called a permethrin. We've been doing this for many years. Public Works logs a lot of complaints. And so what you have before you this is my due diligence to some of the residents who continue to call that council should do something about this. This is one of those things where you either love it or you hate it. There's no in between. The permethrin itself, it's a killer. It kills bees, and then obviously the long-term exposure risks are something that residents bring up. We only spend about $5,000 a year on materials. the financial impact, we do pay overtime to the employees to run the program. I'm not making any recommendations at this time. I'm putting this forward, like I said, as due diligence to the number of residents who've called and logged complaints at Public Works.
Say first. I'd like to hold this till next month. In the meanwhile, if we could find possibly an alternative or maybe a plan to maybe reduce what we're doing, because I think if we all of a sudden we stop and on next Friday, Beach and Fridays, everybody's swarmed by mosquitoes, we'd have a problem. I don't believe full council would be completely willing to just stop this. Like to look at some alternatives, so maybe some chemicals, and I am concerned about the bees, probably more than anything else there. But let's see if we can't come up with some alternatives and a plan, not just to stop cold turkey. That's, you agree with that?
I have no problem with holding it till next month. I have no problem ending the program either. But I would like a more defined financial impact. So not just what we allocate, but if you can tally up
Staffing costs?
staffing costs, fuel costs, truck costs. Let's make sure we know exactly what we're looking at.
Not a problem.
In addition, there's some areas where water does collect. I'm thinking over by the food line distribution area. Sometimes that collects there. By us not spraying, could we have a real problem? I mean, just want to make sure we're really doing our due diligence on this before just stopping.
Certainly.
Do that. We can have that discussion next month.
Perfect. That's fine with me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Mr. Fleetman, thank you for bringing before council complaints that you hear that we may not.
I actually had one. This was also brought up at the same time. So your timing is well timed. All right. That should do it for that. Public comments. Okay. None online. Okay.
No, Mr. Chair.
Committee concerns.
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
We're here on adjournment.
So moved.
Second, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
I'd like to go ahead and call this Finance and Policy Committee meeting to order. The date is June 6th, Monday. The time is about 6:55 p.m. Members present are myself, Mr. Michael Reynolds, Miss Diane Kuznar. Miss King is traveling, and with her stellar attendance record, she couldn't get out of it. So staff present are Mr. Brandon Madden, Miss Holly Abercrombie, the finance director, as well as Mr. Mark Putnam, who was here. First item is going to be public comment. Any present in chambers or online wishing to speak to this committee? Thank you, Mr. Madden. Hearing none, we'll move on to reading and approval of minutes. These are for May 2nd, 2022.
At this time, I'd like to approve the meeting minutes as, as submitted.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. I have a motion to approve meeting minutes as submitted. Do I have a second? I'll be seconding that. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? None. Carries unanimous. Next item is going to be reports and communications from city officers. Mr. Administrator, Mr. Brandon Madden. You're up
Yes,
first.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the administration budget is on par for where it should be at this time of the year. I would like to just note that all department directors this year have done a great job at adhering to the budgeting parameters that council set forth in the current fiscal year budget. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. Do we have any questions for Mr. Madden? I have none either. Next item is going to be Finance Director, Ms. Holly Abercrombie, with a budget review and/or any other question, comments, or concerns.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Everybody's expenditure budgets look to be on, in line with where they should be. And, the revenues are looking pretty good for this point in time. Still waiting on the business license from the municipal association. That's the big one. Won't come till the end of June, so we will not know how that one does until then.
That was my one question.
Yep, but other than that, all the other revenues look pretty good. The ones that, you know, we should look good. Interest, of course, is not, but overall, we're looking really good on revenue side. So if you have any specific questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay. Do we have any specific questions for Ms. Abercrombie? I do not have any. You took my one. Thank you, Ms. Abercrombie. Next item is going to be our HR Director, Mr. Mark Putnam. And I'm sure you have a long update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Wanted to let the committee know that on June 29th, the city will be hosting a job fair. We will have recruiting teams from Public Works, from the Mauldin Fire Department and the Police Department. Of course, we'll have a group here from the City Hall to talk with any potential applicants, talk to them about the jobs. Never know, we may even do some spot interviews, but we want to just try to bring in as many applicants as we can, and that's one way that we're trying to do that at this time.
That's June 29th.
To June 29th.
I'll let Mr. Madden know he can be present here if he has any interest in interviewing for open positions.
Yes.
What? Good. Any other items, Mr. Putnam? Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. Believe it or not. Do you know what time that will be?
Right now, we are looking at 9 to 2.
9 to 2. Okay, great.
And we, I want to give a special appreciation to Jenny Harmon, who is really helping us as far as putting it out there on social media, working with WYFF to try to, as we get closer to that date, get some, maybe not airtime, but at least get on their calendar that it's happening, you know, at that time. And she has been a really a big part of trying to get it out to the public. So if you get a chance, tell her we do, you know, you appreciate what she's done for us.
Not only that, it'd be wise to probably reach out to the local high school, as there were probably some recent graduates that may have an interest in public service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. All right, our next item is going to be unfinished business. We have none this evening. Next item is new business. Dex Imaging Copier Contract. This is going to be on page 5 through 9 of your packet, Ms. Kuznar. Fairly simple. Would you like to take it, Mr. Madden?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. What's being presented to you is an agreement for the copier service for the judicial department. A few years ago, the city began a transition of all of its copy machines to one vendor, Konica Minolta. They have been since bought out by Dex Imaging. And so at this time, now the judicial center's copy machines are up for service. Is recommended to proceed with Dex Imaging for their copy machine.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. The only question I had about it was it's a 60-month lease. Does that fall in line with our contract that we approved already, the large one, or will we get into the same situation where we may make a change and have to stagger these out?
I will go back and confirm, but generally it's a 5-year agreement that's renewable annually.
Okay.
But I will confirm prior, if the committee forwards it to full council, I will confirm prior to the full council meeting.
Perfect. What do I hear? Any questions or comments or?
I do have a few questions. Does anyone know how many copies they normally make per month?
I do not. But I can have that information readily available.
This would fall under the same, it falls under the same lease though previously.
Yeah.
Okay. So we,
Falls under the same lease.
we had a lease that we updated a bunch of copiers, correct? It's the same company that was a large savings over we had 2 or 3 different copy companies, but, so by consolidating all of them, we were able to bring the cost down fairly substantially. It was a
Yeah.
couple of $1,000s a month.
Yeah, and there were a few departments that had, that were
Individual leases.
to change at that time. And so the thought was, as their leases starts to end, to bring them under the same one. So you just have one, really the city only try to have one vendor that you're paying for
Right.
your service.
And this is essentially trying to reach that goal of trying to have everybody under one umbrella.
So that was my next question. Is Dex Imaging the one that city uses for the other copy machines?
It was kind of Kamanota, but they've been bought out by Dex Imaging, so
Okay,
it'll be Dex Imaging.
okay. That's all I had.
Do you have any recommendation? Or would you like to make a motion to forward it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion to forward this item to full council for review.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. I have a motion to forward for review, a Dex Imaging lease for 2 copy machines at Judicial. I have a second for myself. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Carries unanimous. Sorry, I skipped discussion. I assumed you were done there.
I was done.
Thank you. Okay, next item is going to be an amendment to the city alcohol policy. Mr. Madden, would you? lead us on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So, what's being requested is an amendment to the city's alcohol policy with respect to 2 provisions. Currently, our policy for events that have where alcoholic beverages are served or sold, the city collects a charge and provides wristbands. And so this, what's requested is an amendment so that that's no longer the case. The city still can collect the wristbands, check IDs, and give the wristbands out, but they wouldn't charge a fee for it. Just be collecting the IDs and just issuing the wristbands. And then the second provision that's recommended to be changed deals with the direct sales of alcohol. So currently, per policy, only the city can provide direct sales for alcoholic beverages through the issuance of tickets. So the city will sell tickets to participants who will take the tickets to the vendor to purchase the beer or wine. So what's being requested is that the city will allow attendees to purchase beer and wine directly from vendors. So the city will not be collecting cash or handing out tickets so that people can buy them directly from the vendor. So that's what's being requested to be amended in the current policy.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. And this was brought forward by Ms. King that asked that this be placed on the agenda. So I think if there's any questions, what may be prudent is to forward it to full council and have a more broad discussion there, unless you have.
Well, I just have a question about how much the wristbands cost and if we're having to eat the cost of the wristbands. Maybe if that would, if more information can come to full council, I'd be okay with that.
So you want to know how many wristbands the city purchases?
Well, so in essence, how much of the wristbands cost the city? And then, of course, we're trying to recoup some of that money by charging, we check the ID and charge for the wristband, which I've never had a problem paying. I think it's $1 for the wristband. So
We'll add one consideration. If the council could not charge or collect wristbands at all and allow the vendor to provide the wristbands to the event attendees that want to purchase beer and wine. The city could be out of it altogether.
Well, and it seems like, you know, the beer vendors would, it would fall on them to make sure that who they are selling alcohol to are of legal age, and then they could provide the wristband. Okay. All right, well, I'll make a motion to forward this amendment to the city alcohol policy to full council for review.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. I have a motion to forward to full council for more review of the city alcohol policy. I have a motion and I am seconding the item. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimous. Please forward that to full council for further discussion. Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. Give me scrolling. Okay, next item is going to be public comment. Do we have any in chambers or online that would like to comment to this committee?
No, Mr. Chair, no one's online. Public comment.
Awkwardly silent. Thank you, Mr. Madden. Next item is committee concerns.
I have none.
I have none either. What do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. The next committee meeting is going to be, we're adjourned at, I'm sorry, 7:11. Public Works, I believe.
I'm interested in legal bats. We'll call this meeting to order. Let it be known that all committee persons are present, as well as our city administrator and our recreation director, Art Cumlander. First off is public comments. Do we have any?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing that there's none, next is reading and approval of the minutes. What says the committee?
Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes from April 4th, 2022.
Second.
I hear a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, it is approved. All right, now we have reports or communications from city officers. Recreation Director Bart Cumlander.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Allgood. Budget's in pretty good shape. As you know, we're in our last month of the budget year, so we're in pretty good shape, as I said. Just want to thank, I know a lot of the department heads have left, but we had our Golden Strip baseball tournament, which we haven't did that in quite some time, probably in the 90s. I would imagine we did that the last time. The park was full. We had police helping us, fire department and public works, and as our staff was there as well. I would estimate a couple thousand people over the weekend. So it was Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday after church. So one of our teams, 11 and 12, won the Golden Strip Derby. That's what we called it. And our 7 and 8 were a runner-up, and then 9 and 10 and 13, 14 went to Fountain Inn. So we did a good job there and trying to build our baseball program up. And we're thinking about moving it to switching it up each year and going to city, but not trying to brag on our department, but they said they don't know if they can handle what we did. We had an abundance of rain coming in Friday night. Us and Public Works worked together and got the field ready. As you know, when you start playing baseball, it starts raining. And so this coming weekend will probably be sunny and 90 degrees. So I just want to thank again the Public Works Department for helping us out with that. We do have an opening up in our sports center. Our membership person has left, and so that is a job opening. We are hoping to fill that within the next week or two. We got 1 or 2 people kind of really zooming in on that we could interview and been talking to. Also, we have our Trevor Booker basketball camp this week. Also, we have our regular summer camp this week. So on the premises between the sports center and on the grounds, we had over 200 kids today. And so, and it would be that this week. The Trevor Booker camp, we've got about close to 100 for his basketball camp and another 50 or so with that. Probably, I would say it's hard to tell how many kids in that gym today. It was a lot, maybe about 150. So, but anyway, we've done that each year and it's been a huge success. Helps build our basketball program because we have folks that come in the area that, again, didn't know that what that building does. And I've seen a lot of new kids' faces this year. So that's been a really big help for our basketball program. So if y'all have any questions, I can answer those. I think we got a couple other things we could talk about, but we'll go down the line there. So.
Any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No real discussion, but you know, it's very easy. And our department heads hear the bad all the time, what's going wrong. Very rarely do they hear what's going right. My wife and I were somewhere yesterday where a young couple with 4 kids we did not know happened to be talking about the tournament that they had just come from. And all they could do was talk about how great Mauldin Rec is, how great our baseball program is, how great the tournament was, and that they had moved here from Alabama a couple of years ago, and that everything that they had dealt with in Alabama was nothing close to what they have found here. So I just wanted to say, congratulations, Bart. Please pass that along to Willie and Andre and everybody else on staff. Because they are really making a difference in families' lives and in these kids' lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Up next, we have the Gilder Creek feasibility study. Is that going to be Mr. Madden?
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this feasibility study is being presented for your information to be accepted as information. Earlier this year, Davis and Floyd Engineering completed a feasibility study for a trail that along Gilder Creek that would commence right across from Payvan, behind Libby Lane, and would extend all the way from East Butler Road to Corn Road. So the report that they've provided is pretty detailed, provides a cost estimate for constructing that trail, given where the city is currently in its budget process. When the study was completed, it suggested to include this in the city's capital improvement planning process for the next fiscal year, 2024. However, council has the prerogative to change that as they see fit, but want to provide the report and answer any questions that council may have about it.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Madden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Madden, in the executive summary, one of the pieces in the first paragraph actually was a question that I had once I started looking at the cost. It says, from this point forward, even though it is on private property, the trail will be within an easement that gives the city right of way for sewer lines, except for several locations where the trail meanders outside the easement, get closer to the creek. If negotiations go well with the property owners, the only other challenge that could have an impact on cost and schedule will be responding to the requirements associated with construction within a regulatory flowway. So my question comes, and you may not be able to answer this right now, and that's fine if you can't, but what would the anticipated costs of those easements and the anticipated costs of responding to the requirements with regulatory flowway be? Because I don't think that was built into the cost of construction.
Yeah. And speaking with Davis and Floyd, the Lomar is what they focused on, being that it's in a floodplain. Really, it's the cost of the application. I think it's less than 10,000 to submit the application. And then your second question is about the easement. I mean, the right-of-way acquisition that may be required. I don't have an answer for that, simply because it's such a small falls outside of the city's right of way. It basically a city's sewer easement abuts a townhome community. Um, so the property owner would be the townhome. And so, but it's not a very large amount. So the cost of that would have to be appraised to see how much it would be to actually acquire the property. If a cost is even there, that's something that will have to be negotiated with the townhome development to see. It also is dependent upon how wide the trail is. If you have an 11-foot trail, the section that the report is referring to that falls outside the easement could be adjusted for by just reducing the size of the width of the trail at that point from 11 feet down to whatever the easement is. And then widen it back out once you go past that point. So there are a couple of ways that the city could mitigate the right-of-way acquisition costs, but I just don't have a number to put out there for how much it would cost.
Thank you, Mr. Madden.
No questions. One of the things that I noticed with the plan, it goes into detail from not only just paving the trail, but also things like lighting and park benches. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yep. So the Gilder Creek was first on the lighting. So traditionally, you would have a box out there, but because the Gilder Creek is prone to flooding, having a bunch of wires is not ideal. So looking at options that may be solar, or maybe having them in places to strategically that are less prone to flooding along Gilder Creek. The other is the park benches. You know, depending on how it's constructed and how it's put in place, if you have a major flood, potentially could be damaged or washed away. So using materials such as concrete, which can withstand flooding when you're installing the actual bench, is another option there. It's a different cost from using another type of material. So that's kind of where the report focuses on there. Some of that is really options that the city has. You don't have to have park benches. It is another option, but it is almost a half a mile walk. So that's kind of where they were going with the report, putting the onus on the city to decide, if it's prone to flooding, there's some considerations you need to give to the lighting. If it's, and also to the material that you're using to bolt down the park.
So the idea of lighting is for safety purposes, not walking at night?
Safety purposes primarily, but you also have to make sure it's well lit for those that may use it in the dust hours, our park hours. There are times throughout the year where it's darker early. So that is another consideration.
So for the trail that we have that is going to Ridgeway Station, there's lighting out there?
No,
Is there plans to put lighting in there?
if needed. It's not an expense that was taken in consideration when the trail was first constructed.
And in terms of expanding our trail system, given that we have this study here, this seems to be the next step in terms of what our trail system would be.
If it's funded.
It's funded, yes.
But it will be, it can be placed in the capital improvement planning process and weighed against the available revenues to be funded. The city did receive a grant award from South Carolina Parks, Recreation and Tourism, but it's not enough to cover the full cost. Cumberland Recreation Department will manage It's that grant and this trail system, different trails.
All right. Any other comments or concerns, questions? This is an item I don't believe we're voting on. It's just for information only, correct?
Mr. Chairman, what it is great information as we enter the budget process next year to Mr. Madden's point is to look and see if it's something we'd like to fund. Because there's a substantial cost to it, but at least we have the information on what it would take and feasibility of it.
Very good. And one final question. I walked this trail, so I was able to feel the grounds and where the soggy parts are. So when we get out closer toward Butler Road, that too would be paved, or would there be some kind of boardwalk there?
No, I think there are only 2 or 3 land bridges, and they're to cross the creek. So not and a couple little streams that feed into the creek, but not coming down from East Butler.
Okay. If there's no other further questions, we'll move on. Report on new software. Is that in here? There you go.
I think it's right there.
There you go.
Yes, sir. We are currently with E-Track now. We are going to move forward and going Civic Rec, and we're going to pay a little bit this budget year, and then continues to, and paying the rest of it the next budget cycle. To kind of tell y'all some of the issues that we're having with this current company is it's just not user friendly. I get numerous of phone calls saying that they get signed in and they might misspell a name or put the kid's name down wrong, and they can't get back out of the system. This system, when it was initially brought to the city, had the capability, if you had a rain out, it could text you. It does not do that. They can't tell us when it can do that. So Willie Stewart has been really researching with Civic Rec and talking to other rec departments about Civic Rec, and feel like that's the way we need to go. The capability is the same what we have now, and it's just been a lot better company. Some of the other cities that we have contacted, so you can do your shelter rental, building rental, the sports center will have the capability as well, doing the memberships. It also will text cancellation of ball games. And so I think the current company that we are now is they were sold out, and we tried to stay with them because they kept on promising they're going to get better and get better and get better, and it just keeps getting worse. So I think we have really lost some folks because of the aggravation of them just trying to sign their child up to play sports, and people love convenience, and we're in the technology now that we need to make it user friendly, and it has not been user friendly. And so that's one of the reasons that we're changing. We can get out of the budget. Out of the contract that we're in now currently with the company. We made sure of that. And so if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you answered actually. The only question I had is if you're eligible to get out of the current contract with E-Trax, you said?
Correct. Yes, sir. And we're not the only ones. I think there's a lot of been following suit with that. I think they're just, I don't know what the issue is, but our issue is to the people trying to sign up for sports and having the aggravation, and we're trying to make it better for them.
So you mentioned being able to with the new system, being able to rent facilities is that through the online system?
Correct. Just like.
Enough said.
And so, if you're like me, you don't always look at your email if there's if it's going to rain that day. I know we're going to cancel something because I work there, but if you don't constantly look at your email and you get a text, and you can call your wife or whomever and say, hey, there's no games tonight. So it's just a quicker way to respond and let people know what's going on.
And you'll bring this contract before this committee, or is that the I guess that's what I'm asking. This will just be a software change?
It's just a software change.
Okay.
It's already budgeted. Funding is available in the budget. So this is just to make sure that, you know, if you got a call from somebody because the software changed, if you had any questions about it.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. That's the only question I have, Mr. Commander. Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing none, we have no unfinished business. There is no new business. We're opening up for public comment number 2.
No one has signed up to speak, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Any committee concerns?
Mr. Chairman.
Is there any movement on adjournment?
So moved.
Second. We are adjourned at
7:30.
thank you, 7:30.